So, coming up in just a minute, I want to tell you guys is one of the founding members of the Open Compute Project board, one of my mentors, and one of the leaders of Goldman Sachs in their technology division, Mr. Don Duet.
Hi, everybody. My name's Don Duet. I'm really happy to be here and to talk to you about OCP and talk to you about Goldman Sachs. Word of warning, today I'm sure you've had a lot of people up here from the supply side. We're here as consumers, so we're not here to sell you on anything other than hopefully getting you excited about OCP and how we think it's very much positioned for the enterprise and for much broader adoption. Just taking a moment just to start with talking a little bit ourselves. You've probably heard about Goldman Sachs before. You think about investment banking, you think about market making, you think about investment advice. But we are, as you can see from the quote from our CEO, Lloyd Blankfein, we are a business that is fundamentally about technology. And so technology is a huge part of what we do. And I wanted to spend a few moments as we start to talk about how we've embraced OCP in our journey to really talk a bit about technology at Goldman Sachs, just to put some of that in context. So a bunch of numbers here. What they represent is that for many decades, frankly, that technology and finance have been an industry that's always been on the leading edge. That when you think about the ability to make markets around the world, that technology has been a key part of really driving finance and helping change finance over many, many years. And you can see from these numbers that we have a significant investment in Goldman Sachs in technology. For example, 8,000 engineers, that number alone represents almost a third of our population. So employees at the firm, almost a third of those are people that work in engineering in one shape or form. The size of our footprint, over 500,000 cores, that's certainly not hyperscale like some of the firms you talked to and heard from today, but it's material and it represents really how we run ourselves on a global basis. Over 1 billion lines of software and code, which is something that we both see as both an asset and a liability. That's examples of how just deep and how wide technology has become in really running and operating our business. So there's really very few parts of Goldman Sachs that you don't find deep investments in technology to really run that business. And then, really lastly, and I think in some ways most importantly, we've been investing in distributed and open architecture for over 27 years. And so when you step back and think about the evolution of really many of the firms that spoke today, most of them weren't even starting and didn't even exist at that point in time. And so when you step back and look at finance, think about technology, it's an incredibly important part of our business and how we think about things. And mission critical is a word that's often associated with what we do for a living. And it's absolutely true because what we do and how we drive our business, if technology doesn't work, we don't work. Markets, the way we create markets and technology around the world, participating in the ability for investors and customers to be able to transact in real time in many different markets globally is a key component. Real-time risk management, which is the core of our firm in terms of being able to understand precisely what our positions are, where they are, making sure that we're able to manage risk very well in multiple types of asset classes and multiple products. And then more and more as we see an evolution of really moving from client experience from being very much people-driven to being much more and more digitized. These are all core drivers. On the graphic that you see on the slide there, it's a system that we have, which is our principal risk management system, the SecDB system. And that system alone, on a daily basis, has over 23 billion unique prices that are calculated, over 7.5 quintillion calculations that go into making that. So I heard some pretty impressive numbers thrown about this morning. I think we actually have some bigger numbers here to share with you. And these are essential. The way that our business needs to operate from a mission criticality perspective starts with the data center, goes all the way up through the computing stack, up into all of our applications and beyond. And so when you think about the ability to take risk and manage risk, it's fundamentally critical that the systems and software and solutions that we use really are mapped to that. We've also had a very long history of working with open architecture. And as I mentioned before, we've been in the business of building distributed architectures for a very long time. When we think about kind of our own investment portfolio and plan, we began over a decade ago when things were still called grid computing or high performance computing, towards now what things are called cloud. And so we've had a long history both in building out the capabilities to run in a commodity open architecture basis, our risk management for the firm, moving that on into how we think about providing for people all over the world the ability to access their virtual desktops in the cloud, through to really bringing all that into our own data centers and how we run basic OLTP type applications and workflows onto now mobile. And as we kind of play that out and look at that over the course of time, what we also find quite interesting is that really it's reflective of the way that the world has evolved through these technologies, from solutions like companies like Google through to a lot of the cloud service providers that we have today and dynamic access through public cloud. And so we've seen this ability both to support as we've grown our business and moderated and really embraced open architecture. It's also enabled us to be very involved and engaged with a lot of the thought leaders in industry. And that's been very helpful for us. It's been an important part of our strategy. Philosophically, and I think you heard a little bit of this from the team from Facebook, we take a very similar perspective, which is we believe that we can provide, using commodity solutions, good design, and great software, we could solve pretty much every problem that exists. And we think that the agility that we get by being open, by taking an approach that's about building out, supporting and creating agile architectures is critical, because we don't know which way our business is going to turn and what's going to matter tomorrow. So that's been our philosophy. We've been very focused on open source. We're very focused now on open hardware. And a little bit of our history with OCP has also been both long and deep. We have been involved really with the project since its origination. Again, part of our experience in building out kind of large-scale grid computing for our risk management put us in circles that we were able to meet with the teams at Facebook as they were at their very early stages of exploration. Found a lot of affinity. We were able to share a lot of ideas. We found that the experience and knowledge share that we could create was beneficial to each other. We formally joined the board. I've been very lucky to have been a board member now since the inception. And we've been involved in all different projects, most recently really running the hardware management track, but as you heard from some of our team earlier, involved also in many of the specifications of the solutions that are used today. And it's a big focus for us. It's a thing that we found to be incredibly useful, not just for helping, again, give back to the community and be part of that community, but a way to actually learn and inspire our engineers. We don't see this as competitive. We spent the first 2 years of my time, and I know from our team's perspective, often being asked, why is Goldman Sachs involved in this? How does it make any sense? And when we talk to them about how deep and how important technology is to our business, they would understand that better. When we talked more about how our own experience and our own knowledge of how to run, and having been in open architecture for so many years, gave us a window and a view of how technology changes, how we need to adapt for it, that it became more obvious why we were there and how we could both absorb and learn and help provide better solutions, but we could also give back to the community. As I said, we don't see this as competitive. We're going to compete as a business on our services and solutions we provide our customers, and we find that the ability to work within a community, no different than what we learned in open source, in open hardware, is exactly the same, that the more we can share experiences, the more we can derive common value, the more we can help improve everyone's products. But I came here to talk about our journey to OCP, and that's what I wanted to do. So a little bit about our history. Let's talk about where we've been and where we're going and what we're finding. So I'd start with, like all good stories, there needs to be a little bit of conflict. There needs to be a little bit of challenge in there. And so this one is really no different. When you think about where we've been, and I learned a lot in this morning's sessions listening to all the great speakers, but some common themes. One, leading firms build disruptive and innovative solutions. And there's some great firms that were here today talking. They challenge the status quo, which is fantastic, and they really help push the envelope and make us all think and help us improve. But they also create adoption challenges. And we found that to be true as we started working aggressively with the OCP team. And we'll talk about some of the major themes that we found, but first and foremost, Greenfield Brownfield. Are those solutions well balanced? So not only are they great and innovative, but can they be actually consumed by the classical businesses? Secondly, the ecosystem. Can you buy them? Can you get solutions? And then lastly, interoperability and management. So those are all the key themes that we found. I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail. Starting with Greenfield Brownfield. As I mentioned before, the hyperscale firms have been able to aggressively build and create and innovate, and that's been fantastic. The amount of data center creation and both the way that they've really driven the agenda with data center has been astonishing in many ways. Classical enterprise, and certainly not at Goldman Sachs, doesn't. We aren't going to build out our data centers at that rapid pace. We're not going to be able to innovate as aggressively within them. So we have constraints that we need to apply from the data center into our products and solutions that run our business. And one of the first things that we saw, and I think there was some dialogue, I think both at some of the early keynotes and then in the panel from the financial services, of everybody kind of found the same problem, which was a bit of a square peg in a round hole issue, which is, this is fantastic. I've got this server that's amazing. I've got this rack that really optimizes everything in the way that you want to, but I can't really fit it. It doesn't go into my environment. I'm probably not going to go and really change the entire strategy. I've got tremendous investment in existing architecture. How do we make that work? And so, we partnered actively with many of the, both from the financial community and otherwise, with the OCP community to basically say, how do we create a 19-inch architecture? How do we really get a product that could fit into existing racks, that can fit into data centers, that was simple to consume? And that was, a great work that was done. I mean, fantastic efforts both across the supply side of the community with the manufacturers really coming and stepping up to the table and recognizing the challenge. And I think a great example, again, of consumers working with industry to really understand the problem factor. The second issue that we had was just power. The products were designed for medium density power. That's great. That's fantastic. Again, to go into a data center that's been built for low power and have to replace all your power circuitry was probably not exactly a very good starter. So we really worked again with the community to basically do what we think of as kind of moving from perfection to pragmatism and saying, how do we still get the best that we can get out of the designs and the innovation that's come, and really both put it into a model that can actually be consumed. And finding that path has been a great learning experience. I think it's helped raise awareness with everyone, not just the more businesses that are more classical like ourselves, but also with the hyperscale teams. And we were able to get products in place. The Decathlete and Roadrunner are examples of those 19-inch services that we can now imagine both get us a great optimized solution. It may not be the most optimal, but it gets one that's also pragmatic because it fits to the environments that we have. Secondly, we really said, okay, now we have these products, how do we go and get them? How do I buy them? How do I get them delivered to me? How do I get them installed, et cetera, et cetera? And we historically have had experience, given our own investments, in both what we think of the tier one vendor market as well as the ODM market. So we had examples where, for our own needs, we would work with people to white label and build on demand. But we also had a lot of places where we were basically working with the tier one providers in a more standard fashion. And what we needed to do was figure out the path towards how do we both move the ecosystem in a way that can help deal with now these new products, and also looking at introspectively how we do our own business and figure out how we adapt. And so really the four core things that we found that were important that we really need to invest in. First, price transparency. We needed to know that we're buying a server. It's actually a simpler server. We want to make sure it's cost effective, but we don't have the leverage of a very large firm to really move the supply chain, and how do we make sure that we're getting clarity from the people that we're to consume from as to what the cost structure is, and how do we make sure that it's a fair and efficient structure. And that's something we worked very closely with many of the vendor communities over the last several years to really drive that into how they operate. Secondly, we had to really think about global consistency. We are a global international business. We need to deliver product into data centers, not just in the US, but in Europe and in Asia, and really all over the world. And so how do we work with the community to say, if you have an ODM type model, are there ways to expand that so we can help you learn about how you could deliver solutions into other countries? If you already have that model, how do we get to, again, a model where we can get OCP gear delivered from yourself? Third, order quantity. This is one of the things I think where we really learned a lot about ourselves, as well as we learned about the ecosystem. We don't often buy and forecast for computers in very, very large scale. We were used to a model for many years, as I'm sure many of you are, where we would buy in very small units. We knew we had a project, we needed 10 servers, we'd order 10 servers for that product. We had another project that needed 15 servers, we'd order it in that form. And that didn't really work. If you're used to building for hyperscale, you'd be used to building for very large batch runs, managing the supply chain on more of a unit-by-unit basis, but for very large order sets. And so this is part of where we had to work with the ODM community to help them understand better how we could improve the process and help streamline the process so we can get to smaller, large-size units. And also ourselves. This is a place where we also learned a lot about saying, can we forecast better? Can we put in place a better provisioning architecture where, rather than buying in small pieces because that was simple, could we put the process in place that said, look ahead 6 months and begin to move towards more of a slower cadence of purchasing, but in larger size format, so we could actually work the system from both directions. And then lastly, on warranty terms, we have to make sure that we can get these products supported. We need to make sure that they can be replaced and fixed. And this is another area, I think, where we both were able to learn and help move the ecosystem forward by explaining and providing information. We actually ran a number of sessions that through the OCP organization that were workshops that we opened up to all the ODM community to come and basically just learn about all these types of challenges that we had and here, learn ways that they could help move. But it was also another place where we learned that break fix and moving and, taking a hard drive that failed and replacing it right away, that we actually thought there was a lot of benefit and learned a lot of benefit by moving more to replacing a server on a different cadence. And that, we found also helped us because it moved a lot more of the awareness up into our development teams of saying, if you're used to having the ability to have break fix immediately for device, components and for inventory, in a world where that's not, how do you begin to design your software in forms that can compensate for that? So again, these are all ways that we've had to really deal with this challenge of an ecosystem that was really designed fundamentally for either classical enterprise, which was non-OCP, or large-scale large-scale purchasers, which are principally ODM. And then the last thing that we really had to focus on was interoperability and management. We had these products that had to run side by side with other solutions in our data center. We had to go and really look at our own solutions that we had built over time to really help manage the environments themselves and make them work together. So we looked at how do we build software specifications to create the ability to seamlessly install OCP hardware next to other pieces of hardware. Frank mentioned this morning his keynote about the contribution that we'll make. I'm going to touch a little bit on that later. But that was an example of where we looked at the environment we had. We said OCP servers did not come with a telemetry alert management system that would notify you when a server failed, because most of the large-scale providers don't work that way. They're happy for a machine and a node to go offline, and they'll fix it later. For businesses like ours, we need to know if a machine goes down. So we ended up building and enhancing our software products so that we could create the ability to provide alerting. But these are all gaps that we had to close. These are all challenges for us. We've been spending the last couple of years to really work with them. We've been spending a lot of time across both our internal business as well as across the supplier ecosystem. And I think the great news here is that we are in a place today where we're really excited because we could stand up in front of people and talk about how we're now in production and at scale. We've been buying effectively OCP equipment in 2014. We started in the early part of the year by being able to provision for production use case for our stateless environments. And as we move into mid of 2014, we begin to now purchase equipment that we can use in our stateful OLTP type environments. And that's a big step in the right direction. Doesn't cover all of our use cases. We still have workloads that either are very low latency or in some cases very high database intensive, and those are ones that we are still going to work over time with OCP to build out for. But when you look at the kind of core of what we do in our compute environment and the principal asset that we use, we've now been able to get to a place both at the ecosystem side and from a product side that we are able to purchase OCP. And these are some of the results. Nothing talks better than numbers. And so if you look at 2013, the amount of OCP compute in our environment in production was a big, round zero. As we move into 2013, for that year, 30% of the servers that we purchased were OCP product. And as we think about 2015, as we're both buying computers now and this year and we're projecting forward, we're going to see that completely invert. So we're expecting and are planning to buy about 70% of our servers being OCP product and 30% being more classical. And what we've also seen by doing this, and it's only been a short duration, but in the 6 months or so that we've been now running a meaningful amount of OCP product, we're finding out of the box already that it's helping us reduce our power efficiency by 5%. And we think that that's a hard number, and those are good to have. But we also look at the uniformity that it's bringing to our environment, the ability for us to simplify a lot of the componentry, as I talked before, the ability for us to really kind of ripple through the way we manage and support risk. And those are ways that we know and are going to help us reduce costs over time, create a better basis for running and operating our environment and reducing risk overall. So, we're really excited about the fact that it's taken a long time to get here, but we are here and we're in production and we continue to move forward. So as you look ahead, what are some of the key things? From a Goldman Sachs perspective, a couple of points. One, we continue to work to make sure that we can support OCP gear everywhere in the world, whether it be in co-location facilities, owned data centers, et cetera. We continue to have some challenges and efforts, and we need to make sure that that becomes more seamless. That's a lot of things about our internal processes, but we're working them out, and we will continue to do so. Secondly, we also need to get to a place where we can continue to forecast better, that we need to be able to lower the bid size on servers from thousands or hundreds and even smaller numbers. We need to get to a place where we can forecast better so we can get as large a batch size as possible. But we're also going to need to deal with situations where in small offices we're going to need smaller numbers, and we're going to have to figure out both internally as well as the ODM architecture and the ecosystem, how do we support for that. And then last, we're going to continue, as I mentioned before, we've gotten to a place where the specifications that are in OCP and are available publicly are ones that really hit the center of our compute bell curve, but there are still those edges, and we're going to be focused on really working on those types of variants and figuring out how do we work together with the OCP community to both identify what some of the best solutions will be for those types of workloads, and then work on product itself to deliver for that. And then in terms of working with the community itself, we really look at a couple of different things. One, I think you heard today, both from Facebook as well as from the Intel presentations, about the need for a longer-term single-socket variant. So we continue to see in our business that the ability to really drive up optimal efficiency of our compute environment is going to come from a single-socket machine with large amounts of cores and lots of memory. And so that's a space that we're going to be actively involved with the community to help ensure that that design spec is built and built out, again, for 19 inches as well as 21-inch. Secondly, we're going to continue to work on what we call fit-for-purpose warranties with the ecosystem. As I mentioned before, we've been able to get to a really good balance so far that's helping us both adopt OCP while helping the vendors in the ecosystem support us. But we have more work to be done, and there's a lot more efficiency to put into that. And then third is getting a more efficient supply chain. I think part of the challenge is, well, we're on the edge of the leading edge of the curve in terms of being an early adopter, and we're learning a lot, and we're, I think, bidirectionally learning a lot, both from ourselves as well as within the ecosystem. We need to figure out how to make that more persistent so that as we get new products, as well other architectures coming out, that it's not a start and stop every time from the beginning, and it's much more of an incremental, continuous build process. And I think certification is going to be a key part of that. I know it's a big focus from the OCP perspective, and it's going to be one that we'll be very actively involved in working with the community on. So these are all, as we kind of see the next 6 to 12 months, these are things that we're going to be very focused on and working with the community. So I mentioned before about the IP contribution that we're making. Beyond the tremendous amount of work and hard work that our team have provided by being part of the OCP community and helping drive many of the standards, this is the first time that we're actually going to be able to donate source code, and we're very excited by that. And this is important for a couple of reasons. One, it really does address a core issue as a adopter if you're in a more classical enterprise. It really, I think it's an example of where being able to provide that monitoring agent, which we use today and have built today for OCP machines, and we will be building out for all machines, just makes it easier, makes it, reduces one more issue of why you can't use OCP. It's critical for how we run our business. We think it's critical for probably how many of you do run your businesses. And it's something that we think by contributing that source code to OCP and hopefully having the vendor community pick that up and bring it into their products will make it just simpler for everyone else to adopt. It features a lot of modular design, standardizes on alert ID, so it gives a taxonomy that's consistent. So, having different variances across the different types of alert structure from machine and vendor to vendor, this will help reduce some of that. It's been compliant and built and designed to be compliant to the OCP hardware management spec, which I think is a big plus. And it will allow both support for the architectures that we have, and hopefully over time people will embrace the software and expand it for other types of use cases, including the hyperscale one. So we're really excited by this. It's, again, the first time we've been able to make a direct contribution of code to the community. We're excited by that. We think it's one puzzle piece in adoption. We're expecting that we'll find more, but we will hope to be able to help participate and hopefully have more stories like this where we've been able to find ways to give back and help with adoption for enterprise. So that's pretty much the story so far. And as I said before, we're very excited about our ability to drive adoption. We are taking, we think, a leadership role in doing so, and it certainly doesn't come without a degree of challenges and headaches, but we think it's very important. We think it's important for our own business, because as we look at the future and recognize how much it's going to be more and more critical over time for Goldman Sachs to have a great infrastructure and a highly agile infrastructure, this is a big part of the equation. We've also learned a lot, as I mentioned, about ourselves. It's been really, really exciting to watch how we've adapted our own processes and procedures. We've learned a lot from being part of the community. We've learned a lot from really understanding different people's perspectives, and that has filtered down into how we manage risk, how we think about provisioning, and it's been, I think, a great experience in both ways. It's been great to work with the vendor ecosystem, and if there are any of you in the room, thank you for your partnership. It's hard to make change occur, and it's really hard to make sure that everybody feels like that change is good for them, but I think we've done a lot to get people comfortable that this is a better equation for us, the customer, and it's a better equation for the supplier, and that it helps in both ways. And so as we look at continuing to drive forward and really work across the supplier chain and the ecosystem, we're going to continue to do so on that basis of really finding ways that helps create value on both sides. And as I said before, we feel great about it because it's really positioned us well. You know, we're starting today and now saying, and our ability to deliver solutions and create product is all based not just on open source for software, but it's also based on an open architecture for hardware. And we think that's going to pay dividends going forward. We would love to work with anybody out there. If you're thinking about OCP, not sure if it fits to your business, thinking about OCP and thinking that it's really just about for web scale firms, we'd like you to at least listen to what we said and realize that we found a path where it's making a big difference for us and it's really helping improve ourselves. We'd love to be helpful in any way, shape, or form. We have a booth out in the expo area, so if you have questions or want to come by and talk, happy to do that. And again, we thank you all for being here and for being part of the community. Thank you very much.